and Instagram alone, the ability for somebody to make what they want to happen, sell an idea, a pair of sneakers, a SaaS infrastructure, whatever you're up to in this audience, the ability to actually achieve that in the current ecosystem is remarkably high, yet every day people let that opportunity pass by not understanding the two core functionalities of what it takes to be successful, in my opinion today in the macro, which is, do you know how to spend media money on these platforms? And more importantly, do you have the capabilities to produce contextual content at scale? What works on Facebook as a video and with its copy acts very differently than if you put that same video on YouTube, acts very differently than if you put that video on IG, acts very differently. You know, one of the more interesting arbitrage opportunities in this country is Twitter. Though Twitter is not at the same usage, the supply and demand of people not producing content for it against how many do consume Twitter in the country and the region is very high, leaving a huge opportunity for many in this hall to be able to produce on that platform. I would argue that if you have any ambition or company at size, you must today, in the 2020 world, be producing 20 to 100 pieces of content a day. And when I think about how, when I audit big businesses, small businesses, entrepreneurs, the amount of content produced is extremely low, and more importantly, the far majority of content that people put out, they put out the same piece of content across every platform, completely disrespecting the end consumer, the way she or he wants to consume content, and most importantly, not taking advantage of the platform's nuances. If you really take a step back and pay attention to what's happening in the world, both on the political, private sector, Fortune 1000, and entrepreneur level, enormous growth has happened from the individuals and organizations who have bought in to producing content at scale on these 10 platforms that dominate the world. Whether you're in China on Weibo or WeChat, whether VK in the USSR, in Russia, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, on and on and on. I am flabbergasted, stunned by the lack of content being produced by 99% of this audience. It is free attention. It is free attention, and yet we continue to not invest in the creative art needed to communicate, whether in the written form, in video form, or picture form. My friends, the real important thing here is actually a very simple history lesson. This is one very simple history lesson. Everything I'm talking about right now, everything that I'm compelled to get just one person in this conference to go home and finally take it serious, has been happening forever, but more recently in our internet framework, it is very easy to follow who's had success completely based on who actually had a website in 1995, 6, 7, 8, 9, who actually invested in email and email newsletters in 1998, 1999, 2000, 2001, who moved first on Google AdWords when Google emerged. Just to remind everybody, the biggest spender on Google AdWords in the first 5 years of Google was Amazon. Amazon, one of the leading companies in the world, arbitraged underpriced attention on Google search to become Amazon. On Facebook over the last half decade, the number one spenders look like companies like Wish. And if you're unfamiliar with Wish, the shopping app, this is a company that's has gone to a place where it's doing between 6 to 10 billion in revenue, depending on who you listen to. And it's spent 90% of its money on Facebook. When you look at what's happening on Instagram today, whether it's Fashion Nova or Gymshark or brands of that nature, Bang energy drink, they're building their entire businesses on the back of underpriced attention. Where does the world continue to think people are consuming information, and where are they actually consuming information is the biggest paradigm within this room. We will spend the rest of these 2 days in this conference enamored by infrastructure Yet we will not pay attention to what's happening in Hollywood right now, which is, it is no longer who has the biggest satellites, who has the biggest printing presses. The pipes are commoditized. The reason you see a rise of Netflix or Amazon or all the OTTs that will take over the world's content consumption when it comes to entertainment is because, like always, eventually, the distribution becomes commoditized. The internet is the distribution. And when the next technology comes along, probably blockchain, distribution will be even more commoditized. And what you fill it with becomes the variable of success. There are enormous skills that are needed to achieve this, but they're historic skills that have always been had. The ability to produce video content at scale, but have the ability to film all day and understand how to post-produce the video for the platform you're putting into has become a remarkable skill. You know, many of you, how many people here consume my content? Just raise your hands for context. Thank you. So many of you know and have watched as D-Rock has come along this journey with me, filming and producing content. But what he has gone through has been the evolution of wanting to make remarkable films that would take 3, 4, 5 weeks and produce one piece of content, to what he's doing now, which is probably within the last 20 minutes, produce 7 to 25 different pieces of content. Some will just transcribe the words I'm saying now and be written as Facebook or LinkedIn posts. Others will be clipped for 1 minute for an Instagram post. One will be the whole talk as a YouTube and Facebook keynote. The audio of what I'm saying right now will be stripped and will be my daily podcast. We are now living in a post-production, at scale, creative infrastructure that no matter who you are in this room, no matter what your goals are, it is commoditizing almost everything except your ability to actually communicate in this environment. If you take a very big step back and you look at the winners and losers over the last half decade, I would argue that they are wildly mapped to one's ability to understand how to spend time and energy on these 10 to 15 platforms that we actually pay attention to, versus the people that have looked backwards and continued to rely on traditional means to communicate. Communication has always dictated everything. You know, coming from this part of the world, I've studied for a long time how communication, by whom and how, has changed absolutely everything. I find it very unlikely that this audience is confused by what I'm saying. When I say it in America, it sometimes misses the mark. But when you say it in other parts of the world that have gone through massive changes completely predicated by communicators and how she or he communicates, there's a deeper sense and knowledge. I believe that this part of the world and many other parts of the world that have gone through this should be much more acute in understanding that it is only communication that is left in the end. And unless you take a step back today and really become strong, smart, and strategic about how you do that, I believe you will leave enormous opportunity on the table. I'm gonna swing it a little bit now on an individual basis. For the people in here that will not have the resources to create a team and hire people, this becomes an enormous game of self-awareness. There are many people here who will not be good at video. They're uncomfortable, they're insecure, they don't like the comments that people leave when they leave a video. Others are incredible writers, but because the internet so values currently video and audio, they may not deem writing is the skill set that I believe it to be. I actually argue for everybody here who's trying to achieve on Instagram right now, which is a very high group of people, that the copy, the writing that you put with these posts is far greater, even though it is a highly visual platform. For everybody in this room that is looking to advance their ambitions, whether it's writing, whether it's video, or my favorite thing to talk about, audio, you've got to figure out how you best communicate. For many of you, this is simply a game of taking your phone, hitting record and talking, hit save, and post the audio with a standard picture on any of these platforms. You must be self-aware of how you communicate, and then you must find ways to distribute that. I'm gonna leave with a framework of why I believe that audio should be the biggest conversation in this conference. I believe that way too many people make the mistake of trying to catch the next technology wave long before it's the actual technology wave. There's been a remarkable of money lost in the last 3 or 4 years around VR and AR, not because it's not coming, but because the number one mistake in this collective room is not paying attention to the actual consumer. We have ideologies around our technology. We are technologists and get excited about future technologies, but very often over the last 20 years, I have watched this ecosystem get way too ahead of itself without realizing that the consumer was not ready. Nobody is home right now sitting in a VR contraption, spending 10 hours a day VRing. What we need to do is be best at what is current. How many people here listen to a podcast? Raise your hand. Raise it high. Look around. Now, put your hands down. How many of those people that just raised their hands were not listening to a podcast just 5 years ago? Raise your hands. That is what I spend my time on. Where are we now? Not 4 years from now, not 4 years ago, right this second. And right this second, we sit in an incredible place with audio. We value time and convenience over everything. As much as the world wants us to continue to value privacy, every day, humans around the world give up privacy for time, speed, and convenience. It's just the way we are as animals. In that insight, you must understand how important your audio strategy is going forward. How many people here consume YouTube videos? Raise your hand. Raise it high if you do. Just raise it high. How many of you now, when you watch YouTube videos, are starting to not even watch the video, you're just listening? Raise your hands. Look around, keep them up. Look around. This, my friends, between podcast growth, between the fact that the #1 video platform in the world is now being consumed for a shocking percentage in audio, not video, is very important. You can imagine when I see that many hands, why it gets hard for me to get excited about video production value when I know the actual consumption is actually being done in audio. Doesn't mean that video is declining, video is growing. Consumption is growing because we have devices with us at all times. We don't have to go home and watch television or the radio. I believe that the #1 opportunity for the majority of this room is a very strong strategy around podcasting and audio content, especially because what has emerged in the last 24 months and will continue to grow is AI-driven voice devices in our homes. I believe over the next decade, when you look at how much of what we do today through a phone will be done through audio and voice with a device in our home and office and car, will surprise people quite a bit. There will be no reason to grab your phone in the morning to see what the weather is when you're brushing your teeth and you ask Alexa or Apple or Google or Weibo or whatever it may be what the weather's gonna be like. There's not gonna be a need to go to Google search to find a lawyer or the best restaurant when your voice device can answer that for you much faster. I will wrap this thesis and everything I've talked about to the highest level of what I think about every day, and I will leave you with this, and I challenge you with this thought. If you believe what I've laid out this morning, it leads to just one very important conclusion, which is if you are not building your brand or your reputation so that it is in people's head, you become incredibly vulnerable. What I don't think people realize is over the last 2 decades, a written or typing infrastructure of internet has allowed people to be salespeople, not just marketing and branding. You've been able to be found if somebody searches for something. You can be the 6th result on Google. You can buy an ad to show up first. When we go away from a typing and visual infrastructure to a voice infrastructure, you must now establish brand. In a world where I speak to a device and ask it for information, you must produce content today to make me aware of your brand so that when I go and order a pizza, I don't say, Alexa, I want a pizza, and then I let Amazon decide who I'm getting the pizza from. I must say, Alexa, I want Pizza Hut. This little example will play true for all of our businesses, all of our ambitions, all of our political, geopolitical, local, business, personal, all of it. I believe that this is the end of an era where visual and written creative can establish so much brand that it preps you for an audio-centric brand warfare. I couldn't be more passionate and push everybody here to dramatically rev up the content they put out in the world, which is to say the most important part, and the single reason I get to sit here. 99% of the content that is put out on these platforms is selfish. I want you to buy my thing. Look at my thing. Look at me. If you look at the people that are winning, it's about their audience. They're putting out content that brings value. This is an enormous struggle for humans and companies and organizations. However, it is the discipline required to actually break through a world with so much content is being produced. The amount of volume that is being produced is extraordinary. Supply and demand of our information is remarkably difficult to break through. It is why when new platforms emerge, TikTok is not even a blip in this part of the world yet. However, if you look at how Instagram rose, it means that everybody here should create an account and wait to see if it does. If it doesn't, that's fine. You're gonna be okay with the 8 hours you wasted. If it does, there's a remarkable return on investment of attention for your ability to communicate. As a 6-year-old boy, I used to make signs because I wanted to sell lemonade in a street in New Jersey, and I would sit and walk around town looking for which tree and which pole to put my lemonade stand sign on. At 6, it was in my DNA to follow eyes and ears. I sit here 37 years later as a deep practitioner in watching where human beings go and figuring out what to put in front of them to make what I want to happen. I highly, highly recommend that you understand the skill set of that craft is emerging in value at a rapid pace because of the way we actually live in 2020. I hope you take this talk and leave this conference and actually start making instead of debating. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thank you.